start to appreciate that the population, the public, the citizenry are actually the enemies of the state and their corporate allies. This is becoming clearer and clearer. And it seems to me extraordinary that we've arrived at this point where free speech and ordinary protocols of justice are being bypassed. How have we gotten here, Jimmy? And what dangers does it pose in the coming years?
Well, we've gotten here because they have to control the narrative. Before, it was easier for them to control the narrative because they held all the strings to the media. So now that we have media, social media, and things like YouTube, Rumble, that we can actually get our message out to question authority, that's what's dangerous for them. And so they have to control the narrative. They have to censor things that are detrimental to the establishment, because if they can't do that, then they have to start disappearing people. And that's a little harder and it's a little more risky. So right now they can discredit you. Let's just be honest, right? So when Tucker Carlson got fired from Fox News, it wasn't because he was lying. Those people lie on Fox News all the time. They lie on corporate media all the time. They're currently lying to you about COVID, and they're currently lying to you at the top of their lungs about the Ukraine war. Nobody gets fired for that. You get fired for telling the truth. And that's the thing that scares them the most. You don't get in trouble for lying. You get promoted for lying. Look at Rachel Maddow. She did the most Russiagate segments of anybody on television. She told people that Russia was going to turn off their heat in the winter. She told them everything, every lie that could possibly be told about Russia and Russiagate and Donald Trump. And she got rewarded with a $35 million contract, which is $100,000 a day. That's what they pay propagandists to lie. But if you tell the truth, you will be discredited and you will be demonetized for sure. I mean, they control, it's a handful of billionaires that run the world right now. And people don't realize this. There's that movie Network. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but in the movie, Ned Beatty says there are no countries anymore. There are only companies and the international transfer of dollars. And so people like us, we upset that balance, that international transfer of dollars, because the truth might get to the taxpayers, might get to the people, and there might be a revolution. Now, in the United States during the Great Depression, FDR, the only reason he gave people Social Security, the only reason he gave people a jobs program was because the establishment, the ruling capitalists, were afraid of an actual revolution.
So you can break this down because Jimmy's been fire on the Russell Brand show, and he has a ridiculous amount of people who view his show. So it's great to have a voice like Jimmy actually calling for something more than bullshit incrementalism. That's the entirety of the modern social democrat, especially white left. They incrementalists. You got Sunrise Movement, CJ, who's climate incrementalist now. But Jimmy on revolution, right? That's what we love to see. Jimmy also platform activist on the show all the time. He helped us shout out the Jones Strike Summit, participate in the Jones Strike Summit, help us shout out the anti-war summit. He had me on the show a week before the anti-war summit, and I shouted out. He had me on the week before the third party summit. I shouted out on the show. He had Sabby on for the Women's Summit. So you have a guy who uses his 1 million subscribers to get people mobilized for a movement, help people who have smaller channels, not as well-known activists than he is. That's what he uses his channel, his platform for. What do people like Crystal and Kyle use the platform for? To get people to vote for Biden. And I think that mostly where we come down. Well, I'm speaking for myself. I don't want to speak for team, right? Because you got people who have Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome, people who their media diet consists of channels who only are keeping their head afloat because they talk about Jimmy Dore, right? So these channels build their appetite for anti-Jimmy Dore content. So then they go to RBN and they're like, oh my God, RBN, why aren't you going after Jimmy? I watch the Vanguard and they do it. I watch Sam Cedar and he does it. As simple as this. Are you supporting the two-party duopoly or not? Are you supporting grassroots organizations or not? I gave a speech at Worker Strike Back, CJ, and all these leftists who care about labor, guess how many of them covered it? 0. Jimmy covered Worker Strike Back. You guys know that? He covered it. He had Sharma Sawan on before to help advertise it. So do we agree with Jimmy on everything? Of course not, right? But are you helping the movement or not? That's the question. Are you helping the movement or not? The NATO left, the boutique left, they are absolutely not helping the movement. In fact, they are an enemy of the movement. Is I want you guys to understand, for the people who are Western chauvinists and they like attack countries like China, Russia, Iran, and other countries that where we have freedom of the press, we have free speech, and these other countries are authoritarian, tyrannical countries because they do not. And the argument that I have been making since beginning RBN is that these Western societies are not as great as you guys think they are. You have the illusion of a First Amendment, the illusion of free press, because capitalists relies on other mechanisms to censor their enemies. Now, if you're just outright too dangerous, they will Julian Assange your ass, right? They'll Fred Hampton your ass, right? But if you are going against the establishment, they lock you out of capital. They attack your capital. What's more important in a capitalist country where there are no social protections than capital itself, CJ? So, no, they don't straight up lock you up for criticizing the government. But what they do, they go after your advertisers, like Russell Brand. Now, Russell Brand's a wealthy person, but Russell Brand got employees he got to pay, CJ. So they go after your money, and all of a sudden you can't pay your employees. Then all of a sudden you got to scale down your production. You guys see how it works here? You guys, capital is extreme important. Now, we are working class people who heavily rely on the work we do by engaging in citizen journalism, right? If you take out someone who's not Russell Brand, and Russell Brand is like the top 1% of 1%, right? But if you take out anyone else below him, fam, it's over. Demonetize YouTube on RBN, right? Take our Patreon money. It's over for us. Yeah. I'm like, shit, we got to get a job, nigga. RBN got shut down. It's over. And that's how a capitalist country suppresses free speech and freedom of the press. And these are things that revolutionary movements been dealing with since day one. They attack the civil rights movement. They attack all our radical abolitionist movements, attacking our capital, tying up in laws in trials and in the law and the law enforcement system. You have civil asset forfeiture that steals the wealth of and property and money and resources of dangerous left-wing organizations, pro-working class organizations. It's an attack on capital. So they like other countries, when they just straight out go after free speech and freedom of the press, they're like, you guys are amateurs. you guys are fucking doing it in such an overtly comically stupid way. What you got to do is build a system that's heavily reliant on capital, then attack the capital. They have the control of the media held by the capitalists. That's the corporate media conglomerates that we live under. So they seen the old societies and like, man, we got a way better system than that. So let's give them the illusion of freedom, right? But don't get twisted. They will always Julian Assange your ass if you get too dangerous. Now that's my monologue. I want to say, and then I'll pass to you, CJ, for the Could we see that?
So
Brand. Go ahead, CJ.
In the intro clip you saw where the Hill, Rising on the Hill, was talking about Russell Brand saying that he was going to be coming back on. They didn't know at the time of the show that the guest was going to be Jimmy Dore. And then when I went to go look it up, the guest was Jimmy Dore. And I found that the discussion, which I listened to the entire thing, so I've already skipped over the COVID stuff. For those that may want to hear, in the initial part is the COVID stuff. And it's on Rumble. So I just skipped over it because they're able to do that on Rumble. But because we're streaming on multiple platforms, we have to be in line with the YouTube sort of guidelines. So we skipped over that part. But to the part where they're talking about revolution. Go ahead, sir.
Can I say something real quick just because this is
absolutely.
It's a funny comment. I thought we were anti-capitalist, less self-shirt. So the people who believe that so I'm addressing it just because it's funny. The people who believe that socialists and communists are against trade and against basic commerce are probably the dumbest people in political discourse. So do you think that they don't sell shirts in socialist country? Is that your position? Do you think markets don't exist in socialist country? The dumbest people in the political discourse. Give it up to this guy. That's not how socialism works, guys. Please be better. Anyway,
what it is, it's in that, and I don't know if this person is saying that, so I'm not directing this to them, but it's a good opportunity to bring this up. And what it is a fundamental misunderstanding. Like, a person will tell you without telling you, they
Yeah.
have no idea what the subject is about. Like when I went on the Larry
Why would you
Sharp
embarrass
show,
yourself like that in front of everybody?
yeah,
Like,
I
that's
went on the
embarrassing.
Larry Sharp show, and for people that don't, he was a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, and it was a show, it was a panel, and I got on there, and then it got kind of feisty, and then I said, yeah, and it was like, what's your solution? I said, the solution is telling me you have no idea what communism is if you're telling me that China is a communist country. I said, China has more markets than we do, sir. You have no idea what you're talking about to even speak that we're not going to have it. You have no idea. And I went on to ramble, but the point that I'm making, you get the point that I'm making, sir. But go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to address it because it's funny. I just want everyone in our community to be smart. And that's obviously a comment I've never seen before. I don't know why you would make your introduction to our community by saying something so stupid into believing that being a socialist and communist is where we're not trading goods. That's not a thing. So once again, Marx based his theory on how indigenous people lived outside of Western influence, and he found that they had a system that was way more efficient than countries that are benefactors of imperialism and giant industry. So you have countries that steal billions of wealth from countries use slavery, but their people are less happy than indigenous people. So he look at how indigenous people, and they live in a socialist like society, and in those societies they traded clothes. Like that's the thing that's happened. But anyway, it's unbelievably ridiculous. Let's continue. It's funny because liberals and conservatives, they both have no idea what communism is. Like if you watch Morning Joe, you see how they talk about communism. You can't define it. Like you guys are not embarrassed by the inability to define your enemy. I can define exactly who my enemies are. I can define exactly who the imperialists are, exactly who the capitalists are. You guys are making up bullshit. Dude, they think Joe Biden's a communist. They going around living their life completely confused. And I feel sorry for those people. I don't know how people live in such willful ignorance. But let's continue. I don't want to.
Mark Levine. You ever heard of the show Mark Levine? He has a radio show that's bigger than his TV show. He has a TV show on the weekends on Fox News. That's because he is huge. He's probably third in line behind Rush Limbaugh. He talks in this way. He talks in this way that you're saying you can't believe somebody they do on that show. If you're looking for a show. But anyway, let's get back to the this right here. Sorry, Aaron. I know you're going to have to cut that out the section, but if you want to read that comment before we...
I just put this up there. The markets will thrive under communism. Capitalism destroys markets. Absolutely. And people got to realize that China is more of a market socialist economy because you're operating a state where giant industry and capital is concentrated within capitalist countries. So they allow the flow of capital to invest in their society, but guess who owned the housing, CJ? The state. Mm-hmm. That's why the average rent in China is $400 to $500. You want to know who owns the infrastructure? China. That's why they're not charged insane rental prices. You want to know who owned the banking system? China. They own that. That's why families in China aren't charged outrageous interest rate loans. So you guys see how it's a more intelligent way of central planning. China is not always communist yet, but using the existing structures that exist today, they are on the process of implementing a socialist communist society, doing the best they can by nationalizing very, very important industry. But in our global society now, CJ, you got to allow the flow of capital if you're going to do trade with capitalist countries, correct? So that's what they allow. They allow capitalists and they allow people to invest in their infrastructure. That's 100%. But anyway, let's go ahead, CJ. I'll pass to you and we can continue because I don't want to go too much.
Yeah, no, we love these conversations. That's why we get sidetracked because we do like this particular one. These are one of the topics that you and I both like, but you're right. Let's get back to the topic at hand. And there will be some parts that I will skip that they say a couple of things. Not that I'm just overly cautious, and that's what I just want to do. So let's continue to listen to this conversation. I'm just going to back it up just a little bit so we can hear what he said in the last minute and a half here, because it's spot on from the question what he says here. So let's start just with Russell.
Is that regardless of the subject, whether or not it's war or pandemic response, the same PSYOP units, this I'm speaking in particular in the UK, the same PSYOP unit moved effortlessly from responding to ISIS to responding to what it called COVID disinformation, to responding to dissent around the war. It's difficult to not start to appreciate that the population, the public, the citizenry are actually the enemies of the state and their corporate allies. This is becoming clearer and clearer. And it seems to me extraordinary that we've arrived at this point where free speech and ordinary...
Would you say that, Nick? Would you say that it's not just an activist is an enemy of the state? It's like people, like even unknowing people who may just have an idea of humanity, but that idea of humanity goes against, what the state wants.
That's why.
So would you say that? Go ahead, speak on that.
Yeah, my bad, CJ. But that's why the people who push back on my views on immigration, because I don't believe the state should have the right to tell me where I should go, right? I believe in free movement, the same way that old school libertarians used to believe in freedom movement. And then people say, you don't have a country if you don't have a border. This is what they say. And I'm like, you think capitalists give a fuck about that border, fam? Yeah, they moving their business everywhere. They doing They have communications with capitalists across oceans, across societies. This border is what they use to hold and they control workers, right? So anyone is a threat who challenge the capitalist structure in which they all benefit from. So Russell Brand is across the Atlantic Ocean, CJ. So why do the United States media care so much about going after him, CJ? Wouldn't we be more neutral? But if you look at MSNBC, CNN, the liberal establishment, they go after him too. Because it's one all big club. They don't view, oh, we're the United States, the other countries over there. No, we're capitalists. Those Saudi people who are funding us are capitalists. Those Israelis who we bank for are capitalists, and we all in it together. And then they turn to us, they're like, we want you guys to fight over borders. As they trading among each other. That's why I want people to view everything through class. So I view everything through class. That's why some right-wingers look at me crazy when they like, you talking about you want to get rid of ICE? You don't believe there should be intense investment in border security? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The old school libertarian argument was, let's save that money so we can have freedom of movement. So if you're a worker, you have maximum rights, because if I want to work in Mexico, I have the choice. I have the right to do that, right, CJ? If I wanted to work in Canada, I have the right to do that. The anti-worker is giving the government the ability to regulate how you move. And I know I keep going on these side tangents, but people who think, oh, well, we got to close the border, we got to have a country. The only thing that stops people from moving across the border is what? Capital.
Money.
Nigga, Bill Gates can go over the fuck he wants, fam.
And corporations, Nick. Corporations can go over wherever they want. And let's look at this, because you say, are corporations sidelined by borders? Because listen to UAW when they talk about the big three. You notice the big three has been substituted. There's a new name in the big three, Nick. Stellantis. Stellantis wasn't around 30 years ago. That's an international company that owns these historically American brands, American known brands. You think about Budweiser. That's not owned by an American company. That was bought out by an international company a long time ago. So you're thinking they don't care about borders, Nick. Capitalists don't, but they want us to.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, and that part of my decolonizing my mind thing, like, because what they say, I assume is the opposite of true. And then I use logic and I reach my own conclusion. When you see how capitalists operate, they don't have this fucking harsh policies that they put on themselves when it comes to movement and travel. The only restriction they put is on money. So if you Bill Gates and the cost of travel is nothing, you essentially have freedom of movement. Now, workers, we don't have unlimited capital, so I call for the freedom of movement of our workers. If you're a country that have friendly trade relations, you're in the region of each other, you got friendly relationships, you love Mexico, you meet, your leaders are meeting with each other, we trading goods, why not have the ability to switch? Like, and I want people to understand, borders are a new construct. I am begging people to read history. I was a history nerd before I was in politics, fam. Borders are a relatively new thing. When you look at middle century Europe, when you look at the Roman Empire, when you look at how humans lived before, you can just cross countries. They'd be like, hey, where your business here? They will ask you a few questions. Where your business here? What are you doing? Where you going to trade? You got any family? They ask you a few questions. All right, welcome in. Like, there wasn't this new police state ICE. Its intense border enforcement is a new thing that was developed by capital by a need to create an industry out of nothing. It's a job program for psychopaths. But once again, I'm sorry, CJ. Let's get back. We get back on track.
Program.
We talk about a lot of content. It's not bad, but we can get back to the topic.
Let's get back to the video. All right. So he asked the question. Let's listen to Jimmy again, and then we'll let it play.
Protocols of justice are being bypassed. How have we gotten here, Jimmy? And what dangers does it pose in the coming years?
Well, we've gotten here because they have to control the narrative. Before, it was easier for them to control the narrative because they held all the strings to the media. So now that we have media, social media, and things like YouTube, Rumble, that we can actually get our message out to question authority, that's what's dangerous for them. And so they have to control the narrative. They have to censor things that are detrimental to the establishment, because if they can't do that, then they have to start disappearing people. And that's a little harder and it's a little more risky. So right now they can discredit you. Let's just be honest, right? So when Tucker Carlson got fired from Fox News, it wasn't because he was lying. Those people lie on Fox News all the time. They lie on corporate media all the time. They're currently lying to you about COVID, and they're currently lying to you at the top of their lungs about the Ukraine war. Nobody gets...
That's true, Nick. Do we know of anyone who has been banished forever from media for being found out from telling a lie? But we know people who have been banished from media who's been found out been telling the truth. I mean, the guy who was just on MSNBC, Brian Williams, he was banished because he was found out that he was plagiarizing and lying in media, didn't have sources. So he was off the news for a couple of years, and people like, what happened? Then the story finally came out. Oh, yeah, he was lying. All that shit he was making up. He got another chance. Not only
do they not go after liars, they promote you and give you rewards the better of a liar you are on behalf of the establishment. Look at all the people who used to work for George W. Bush who lied about the war on terror, who are now esteemed writers at the Washington Post, have news shows at MSNBC. What's her name again, CJ? I always blank on her name.
Nicole Wallace.
Nicole Wallace. I always blank on her name, but Nicole Wallace used to work for George Bush. Wasn't she like a press secretary?
Liar. Yes, she was outright liar.
Her job was literally to lie for George W. Bush, but now she's loved by the liberal establishment, right?
It's amazing.
Rachel Maddow loved by the liberal establishment despite spreading lies about Russiagate. So they don't punish liars; they actively reward them if they do lying on behalf of the establishment. That's why you see many people who used to be part of the Bernie's campaign decided to do the exact same thing. They're like, nigga, we tired of losing. Cal like, I'm tired of losing. I'm trying to get rewarded by the establishment. So I'm gonna spread lies about the Biden administration, right? Bernie Sanders is gonna spread lies about the Democratic establishment and Biden's record because he don't want to be Ralph Nader, right? So they know how the system works and they are playing it, right? But go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, it's like they're tired of fighting Goliath, so they join him. That's essentially what you're saying.
They gave up. They nihilists at the highest order.
True that.
Gets fired for that. You get fired for telling the truth. And that's the thing that scares them the most. You don't get in trouble for lying. You get promoted for lying. Look at Rachel Maddow. She did the most Russiagate segments of anybody on television. She told people that Russia was going to turn off their heat in the winter.
I know what I was talking about.
Every lie possibly be told about Russia and Russiagate and Donald Trump, and she got rewarded with a $35 million contract, which is $100,000 a day. That's what they pay propagandists to lie. But if you tell the truth, you will be discredited and you will be demonetized for sure. I mean, they control, it's a handful of billionaires that run the world right now, and people don't realize this. There's that movie Network. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but in the movie, Ned Beatty says there are no countries anymore. There are only companies and the international transfer of dollars. And so people like us, we upset that balance, that international transfer of dollars, because the truth might get to the taxpayers, might get to the people, and there might be a revolution. Now, in the United States during the Great Depression, FDR, the only reason he gave people Social Security, the only reason he gave people a jobs program was because the establishment, the ruling capitalists, were afraid of an actual revolution. And so FDR told the wealthy,
he was afraid of communists.
From.
Yeah, that's spitting. Another part.
Now, Jimmy is spitting. I'm gonna just add something here. They was afraid of communists, fam. So one thing they were saying, and this was directly from the FDR administration in their game planning, there was a massive rise of the American communist movement and unions having communists, and these are the people who got all your workers' rights, right? 40-hour work
Right.
week, such and such. So social democrats and capitalists realize in order to stop an uprising communist movement, they need to start giving them social democrat reforms. Not to black people though, not to indigenous people, not to any of the undesirables. We're gonna give it to the poor white working class so they can take pride that they are a class above the dirty Negro, then the Latino, then the Italian, right? All the lower classes back in the day. So it was an anti-communist move to prop up social democracy. Not saying Jimmy was wrong. I just want to add additional context because I want everyone to realize this is class war, even for people who do good stuff for us. They want to give us crumbs to stop the furthering spread of class solidarity and militancy. But let's continue. Once again, Jimmy's on fire. I just want to add some more to that.
Yeah. I don't see. Yeah, I don't think anybody would misunderstand what you're saying as different. I just think because he's more broadly saying these people, and then you're going in and saying, yeah, these. Let me identify some of the people that Jimmy Dore is saying who brought this change. And you're right. Anybody can look this up. Thomas Frank we had on. And we talked about, this was a long time ago, Nick, when I had Thomas Frank on. It was a long time ago when we were talking about his book. He kind of talks about that. But let's get back to the video. Here's Jimmy.
He said, if you don't give them some of your money, they're going to come and take all of your money. And so that's the only thing that scares them is an actual revolution, which is what I think we need right now in the United States or in the West for sure, because we are controlled by a handful of billionaires. Right now, they're in the United States. We
now, once again,
under every bridge.
Just real quick, Crystal and Kyle, Sam Cedar, all these people who love the Democratic Party, they will call Jimmy a nihilist, right? Jimmy and RBN, we are the nihilists because we are not calling for bullshit incrementalism. You got all these privileged, wealthy, white leftist channels that are essentially Biden bros because they gave up on institutional reform. They got their ass kicked in 2016 and 2020, and now they're waving the white flag. So now they are cheering on incrementalism. Biden created the climate corps. We got a climate corps. The Nord Stream pipeline bomber gave us the climate corps. They surrendered, fam. And I viewed them with utmost disgust. Meanwhile, Jimmy, who we may not agree on everything, he's calling for a revolution. Yeah. This is a guy that a lot of people believe is privileged, right? But he's calling for a massive upheaval of the status quo. And the position of RBN is, are you for revolution or you're not? If you're for incrementalism, we're going to come on and we explain to our audience why you and that is bullshit. Now, this is fantastic because I didn't see this before, CJ. I've been really behind the independent media. But this is fantastic.
This just came out. This literally, they just stopped the live stream for this interview 30 minutes before we started.
Great catch.
I caught it. Yeah.
Fantastic that Jimmy is going on Russell Brand on his massive audience and calling for revolution. Fam, that's gigantic. I'm just now seeing this for the first time on his audience. Now, Russell audience is blown up in the last few days. It's always been giant, but it shows how censorship really doesn't work because a lot of people are tuning in now. So on the comeback shows, we got this massive audience, more than usual because the censorship, as we always say, failed. Jimmy's calling for revolution. That's unbelievable. That's great to see. Let's continue. I want to see what Russell responds regarding that. Anyway, let's continue.
And when it's important because what I want people to understand, because there's a lot of people that's impatient. They're like, revolution. Now I might be one of them. I used to be more impatient. We have to understand a revolution. There is spontaneous revolutions, but the kind that are planned, that's years. That's years because first you have to get in and I think this is where we are now, in just the realization that a revolution is needed or nothing's going to happen. And I think we're in that phase where we're going from more people are realizing, this shit, it's needed. It's like, there's no other way anything is going to happen. And not just activists. You get what I'm saying? Activists have been saying that shit since day one. But now it's more people in the suburbs. It's trickling into other groups where the revolution, except for the professional managerial class where Crystal Ball is, because she's the higher you go up, then the less conversations it is about that in a real way. So I'll just say it that way. All right. Let's continue.
bridge. People don't have a living wage. 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck. We don't have health care in America. People still go bankrupt. I was one of them, went bankrupt when I got sick. We still didn't, but unlimited money to Ukraine. And so what does that tell you? They're doing, so Chris Hedges once said that they're lying, cheating right out in the public right now, and nobody cares. And that's exactly what's happening. They've concocted this Ukraine war narrative so they can go do a money laundering operation, which is now called the Ukraine war, which they provoked so they could start their money laundering operation to give it to their donors. This is all about the donor class running our Congress and our presidency, at least in the United States, the donor class does, which is why they're also criminal.
Now, the donor class running everything. Now, let's say you disagree on a bunch of things with Jimmy. Isn't this point a central point to liberate the vast majority of people from whatever bondage? You know, it might be because you're a woman, it might be because you're a trans, it might be because you're black, whatever liberation you need. Isn't what he's talking about and what in the way that he's talking about, isn't that what's going to liberate us all from the chains that we all have from the same people? You get what I'm saying? So I really wanted to hone in on that, so we can get back to it though.
Criminalizing Donald Trump, because they've demonized Donald Trump as a white supremacist. That's what the establishment flexes now. First they call you a sexist, then they call you a misogynist, then they call you a white supremacist, and they've done this to Donald Trump. And now it's harder to sell wars with someone you've demonized as a white supremacist. So now he's no longer useful to the establishment. So that's why they have to discredit.
What are they going to do, Nick, if he gets elected? To this point that Jimmy's making, what are they going to do if he gets elected? A president, now the United States has a president that you've ran through the mud with 91 charges. He's supposed to go to other countries. Like you did this to yourself to the point that he's making. This is why I think it's such a fierce battle in ways I've never seen them fight. That a single person they're trying to target. They don't care if anybody else wins. Ron DeSantis here, let's roll the red carpet out you. Nikki Haley, these are neocons, Nick, like Hillary Clinton level neocons. They don't care about that.
Do you remember how much they used to hate Chris Christie, fam? Now they love that guy. Chris Christie had an 8% approval rating in New Jersey, and that not only was he corrupt, guys, all of them are corrupt. But Chris Christie had an 8% approval rating because everyone in the media hated that guy. And they used to drag his open corruption. And like he used to be a Trump fan. He was always a guy who played to the most farthest right social stream to the Republican Party. So liberals hated him. Now, just because he turned on Trump, they now view him as a fucking hero. And they're the reason why Chris Christie got 4%. Even that. But anyway, go ahead, CJ. We can continue.
Yeah, even that. Yeah, we can continue. Good point there.
Credit him and criminalize his organization. So that's exactly what's going on. And so now there's also protesters in Atlanta, Georgia, who are
Nick, this is one of the things that what other white podcaster that's bringing up Cop City? He's bringing up Cop City, Nick, in front of this guy gonna have millions of views on this. He has these allegations dropped. This is his first episode. And who does he bring on? Jimmy Dore. This is going to be watched. And Jimmy Dore is bringing up Cop City to an audience that would probably never hear about this. But we're supposed to be like Jimmy Dore is not an ally.
Meanwhile, Anna Kasparian, Sam Cedar, and the rest of the NATO left. They fearmonger about homeless people, and they support the police state. Sam Cedar famously said he doesn't care that the police is funded more. But Jimmy Dore is the only white leftist I see with a giant platform that regularly does anti-cop segments. Do you guys remember he brought my radical black ass on his show, and we did a segment roasting the police? Like that was like the first intro segment I did because I was like, bro, if I'm on Jimmy's show, I'm gonna go with my hardest message. Like it was like the first maybe 2-3 times I was on the show, and I went on this spiel about why the cops were horrible when they abolished the police, and you need to stop being afraid of your neighbor. I still remember this rant, and Jimmy instead was like, whoa, Nick, holy shit, Nick, whoa, this crazy shit. He didn't do that. He's like, yeah, hell yeah, Nick, this is why the cops are horrible. Like, so Once again, do I agree with them on everything? Absolutely not. But what other white leftists out here with a giant platform is calling out the police, right? Anyway, let's continue, CJ. That's a great point.
Killer Mike just now brought up Cop City, and he's a black person in Atlanta.
Jesus Christ.
He's just now bringing this up, Nick. And that's the story we're gonna have to push over because of John Mubaraka calls him out. But listen to Jimmy Dore talk about Cop City.
To the establishment. So that's why they have to discredit him and criminalize his organization. So that's exactly what's going on. And so now there's also protesters in Atlanta, Georgia, who are protesting against the expansion of the police state there. It's called Stop Cop City. So the same jury that used a thing called the RICO laws. RICO laws were invented in the United States specifically to go after the mafia. They're now using it to go after their political opponents, whether it be Donald Trump or whether it be protesters against the expansion of the police state in the United States. And people pretend they don't see those two things. You don't have to like Donald Trump to be worried about this. I'm not.
I'm not, this is a broad thing I'm saying, so I understand there's differences. But think about what he's saying. Two different groups of people that you would not think to have anything in common, both are being targeted by RICO. Now, whatever's going on with the ruling class, I don't care about the election and all this shit and stolen. It is a corrupt election, regardless if it's not corrupt in the way that Donald Trump is saying it. But that's not the point. And I'm not, necessarily taking sides with that, but you get the point. But anyway, let me get back to the Jimmy video before I go off on another tangent. I feel it.
Not a Donald Trump supporter. I never voted for Donald Trump, but I can see it's just like that old saying, when they came for the Jews, I didn't say anything because I wasn't. When they came for the trade unionists, I didn't say anything but when they came for me, there was nobody left to say anything. And that's why it's important we stand up now and say something about the criminalization of the politics and the political opponents of the establishment. That's what we're seeing left and right, whether it's about COVID, whether about the truckers, whether it be about climate change and the way they're using our fear of climate change to control us, manipulate us, and get us to hate each other. And that's another thing that the establishment corporate news does in the United States, is they report every story in a way that turns the country against each other. And against, I'm supposed to blame right now, the establishment wants me to, they did a controlled demolition of our economy.
To Jimmy's point here, Nick, every time there's a shooting, what do they try to say? Let's go to his social media and see. Is he a Trump supporter? Is he a Biden supporter?
Yep.
To his point, they try to turn everything into red or blue because that's how they govern by fear. They govern by fear and divide and conquer. And it's working, but it feels like there is some shakiness in this foundation of what they've been doing. And the cracks are independent media. We are the little termites in their structure, eating away, and they're trying to, get an exterminator. It's not working.
Yeah,
as long as
CJ,
there's enough of us.
Remember, the establishment is still trying to see what they can get away with. The Biden administration lost the Fifth Circuit case because they argued that Biden was pressuring social media companies to censor the political opposition. So this is what the Biden administration wants to do. The Biden administration wants to be able to censor anyone who questions their COVID policies, health policies, let's expand it, health policies, war policies, Ukraine policies. And the Fifth Circuit shot that down. And instead of taking that L, the Biden administration is now taking it to the Supreme Court, fam. So they are so desperate to censor and to establish an authoritarian regime to challenge independent media, they are willing to take the public humiliation of losing a Supreme Court case that's shown that they crack down on free speech. You know how much they want to crack down on that shit, CJ, and they're willing to take that loss off of the small CJ. They doing that off of the small chance that the 6'3" right-wing Supreme Court will side with them. That's how desperate they are to censor, CJ.
Ridiculous.
So imagine what they would do if we allowed them to get away with it, right? That's why we got to keep the pressure up. I'll let you continue, CJ.
Yes. All right. So let's get back to the video. Here we go. Jimmy and Russell.
economy during COVID that wrecked everybody except a handful of millionaires and billionaires at the top. And they want me to hate my neighbor and blame my neighbor for the pain I'm feeling because they wouldn't take a vaccine that didn't work the way they said it did in the first place. Well, I'm not going to hate my neighbor because they're suffering just like everybody else is under the same garbage from the.
So that we do not agree with. The vaccination does work. I think he said something to the, just in case he said something along those lines, I'm giving a little disclaimer.
Yeah, I think they on Rumble. We're on
yeah,
YouTube.
yeah. I don't think he said nothing crazy, but I'm just saying, anytime he says COVID, I just feel like I want to say something about it, and I'm just going to say here, no, we believe in the vaccination. We believe in everything that the United States government and the CDC and the FDA has put out about vaccinations and COVID policy, and all masking and everything. So just wanted to make sure I say that. Get your booster shots too.
The oligarchy, and I'm going to join with them to oppose them. And it's so bad in the United States that they won't even give money to those victims in Maui right now. They got totally wiped out. He offers them $700, Joe Biden, but only if we give another $24 billion to the most corrupt country in Europe with absolutely no oversight whatsoever. It's 100% money laundering operation, the Ukraine war. We're completely corrupted. The only thing I think that can save us now in the United States is a revolution that takes down and tears apart the government and the corporate media.
Jimmy, that is a powerful piece of rhetoric that you have just unloaded. And it's impossible not to take note of Julian Assange's famous observation that the function of government is to take money from public hands and to place it in the hands of private interests.
Do you feel that is the only, I mean, we all can say, you know, that is the function. Do you feel like government has been anything other than that in the United States as a function of just taking money? Or when do you feel like it kind of was exacerbated, or kind of, you know, nitro was added to it, to where it's like, now it's like this literally, Nick, what aspect of the government is not in some point exploiting our money, either through labor or just by what the use of what our money is being used for?
Our government, and I said this many times before, the United States is literally an arms dealer and drug manufacturer that is masquerading as a state. So CJ, our government is so pathetic. Joe Biden passed a pathetic infrastructure bill, and they want us to praise them for governing on infrastructure. You mean your job, fam? You know, the thing that's supposed to be your job? That's how low the bar is. If you pass an infrastructure bill, that we're supposed to forget about your war crimes, forget anything else you did. Because our society is not built on actually proper governance. It's based on our anarchy, building giant police industries, right? Building a military industrial complex, building a border industrial complex, right? So that's what our state thrives on: selling weapons, selling drugs. They're like, oh my God, we got this border crisis. Oh my God, the border crisis. I don't know. Maybe the CIA should start working with the cartel. maybe that would solve the problem. Y'all not ready for that conversation. Anyway, let's go ahead, CJ.
They're really not. All right, we'll go only about another 5 minutes in this segment, because I do want to make sure we get about 40 minutes for every segment, because each one is a good, decent amount of receipts to go to. So let's go about another 5 minutes on this video before we switch it up. So let's listen.
And that they have become adept at providing means to undertake that very thing. This criminalization of opposition in all its forms, whether that's at the level of the individual in order to facilitate censorship, whether it's to legitimize more surveillance, whether it's to create more and more opposition between communities that might otherwise be united, appears to be a technique and a tactic that is plainly on the rise. When you talk about revolution like that, and when you describe the conditions in your country, and it's not that different in our country, Jimmy, to tell you the truth. It seems that what you're describing are the perfect conditions for revolution: disenfranchisement, disenchantment, attacks on not only humanity itself, but almost the essence of humanity. Values like kindness, compassion, unity, forgiveness, redemption, justice. The institutions themselves are becoming an anathema to our highest creeds, our highest values. I would say the apotheosis of humanity is our ability to cultivate and create cultures around compassion and kindness and unity and fairness and justice. And it seems that these models, these modes, are being broken down. When you describe a figure like Trump being criminalized in the way that he evidently and plainly has, vilified to the point where there are certain people who can't even hear his name without it like being a dark bell rung in their hearts.
That is Trump derangement.
It shows us that we're at a point of almost ubiquitous fracture. I wonder, Jimmy, how you see the role of independent media relating to new independent political movements, and even if those political movements are currently in your country, the main parties. I'm talking specifically, I suppose, about Bobby Kennedy, who's emerging out of this pandemic and war period.
So he obviously has an affinity for Bobby Kennedy, and I don't think it's going on a limb to say that Jimmy does consider him as a friend, even if he disagrees with him on Israel. So let's listen to what he says here about Bobby, but it's not really about Bobby, just using Bobby as an example. So let's listen.
As an authentic voice, and in spite of his surname and the obvious fact that means to a degree he's a legacy politician, he's creating a lot of hope. He's creating a lot of traction. He's the first political figure, perhaps other than Trump, with Trump's relationship with Twitter, who's been able to gain access to an audience without having to move through the legacy media gatekeepers who seem hell-bent on preventing oppositional voices from uniting and from...
Yes. Fox News loved the guy, so... It's very entertaining political fan fiction that he's weaving here, though, but let's continue.
Yeah, no, because there is the people that really believe in him, and I don't know if it's Russell Brand. I don't know if because I don't watch enough of his content to know if he talks about RFK that much, but there is people that I've seen, and they do see him as really like this, like non-establishment fighting against and nobody bringing him on. And I think what they mean when they say that is that he's being shut out of liberal.
Yeah, people like, I'm not impressed by partisans, man. Like this is the thing. He's a Democrat. He says he's a lifelong Democrat. He's not changing from that. So for one, strike 1, 2, and 3. 2, he is Zionist. Secondly, he's loved by the right-wing Republican establishment. That's not an attack. That's just a fact. So when Russell says that he's shut up by legacy media, Fox News is bigger than MSNBC and CNN. So I never understood that. We were like, oh man, you're hated by the mainstream media, but Fox loves you. That's a big part of the mainstream media, right? Right. I've seen him on multiple shows on Fox News, and then they just having a great time. And one thing, I have no problem with going on Fox News. I have no problem going on right-wing shows. But if you go on the right-wing shows, there better be some tension. I've been deeply unimpressed because this guy, he wants no funk. He go on the right-wing show with these capitalists who pro-war, and then they just have a great, pleasant conversation. So the only thing I will put back on Russell here, just in our general put back on RFK, is that he's not a threat to the establishment. He's a threat to some narratives, and we will give him props for threatening some narratives, but he's not an active threat to the establishment. And when he kowtowed to Israel, you know that there's a limit to where he's going to challenge. And he was willing to lose a giant portion of his support base. I mean, you had the gray zone, Max Blumenthal, many people with much bigger audiences than RBN that was supporting RFK, and then the Israel shit happened. They was like, fuck that. Jimmy himself was like, fuck that after the Israel thing. And then instead of course correcting on that, seeing that you losing Jimmy, you losing Max, you losing all these people, he like, I'd rather lose those people than piss off Israel. Like, that's how little of a threat that he is. Now, if he was actually a threat, he'd be like, fuck Israel. I want to build a broad coalition, but he's not going to do that. But I don't want to belate the point. Let's continue to the video.
No, but one thing I do want to say is threat to the narrative. And maybe the way they're describing him is shorthand, because American people, not American, but American language is a lot of shorthand in how we speak. So we say something that necessarily, if you think about it technically, is not accurate. But maybe. But anyway, let's continue with the video.
From being amplified. When you talk about revolution, obviously, it seems that in 2023, with a militarized police force, with a surveillance state, with anti-protest laws, with the increasing ability of governments to switch off money supply, to shut off your tech, to shut off your ability to communicate, that the type of revolution that we're discussing would have to have a very different flavor and would perhaps have to coalesce around political figures that are willing to carry that burden. Do you think it is a revolution?
Yeah, you see, he gives RFK way too much credit. So what he's saying here, I'm going to talk about it in two different ways, because what he's saying revolution-wise, I do think is a good point. But applying this as if RFK can be that thing, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But again, there is people who really believe, Nick, and I've been in DM, who really believe he is that figure. So maybe
I would
Russell
say this.
Brand
I would
is
say
one
this
of them.
to be more positive. I would say this to be positive. I appreciate the optimism. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's better than the nihilists like Kyle who suck up to Joe
Right.
Biden.
Right.
So to be positive, I think the RFK people who think that he's a candidate revolution, that's adorable, and I appreciate the revolutionary optimism. I just want them to get real, and I want them to be serious, because there's no way we're gonna attack this establishment that Russell Brand just now is talking about how formidable it is, right? How are we gonna take on a formidable establishment with no legitimate revolutionary plans that is rooted in class struggle, that is rooted in theory, that's rooted in what actually worked in revolutions before, right? So I appreciate the optimism, but I want us to be disciplined. But anyway, let's continue. I don't want to be like.
Yeah, and to that point, you say appreciate the optimism is that, like, I love where this group of people that might believe that you at least you're in a place where you're ready for a revolution.
Yeah,
you just want a leader. We're just saying this is not the leader. So I don't want you to discourage you from the revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guts, you're like where you're at. Don't do that. I don't want to do that. We're just saying not this guy. All right. So let him say the answer. This is the final question, everybody. This question that he's just asking Jimmy, and then we're gonna end it here.
That requires leaders? Do you think it is a revolution that's happening at the level of the nation? Do you think it's a revolution that by its nature has to include a significant portion of the population? And if so, what do you think is going to be the significance of relationships between independent media, particularly if independent media is under attack, and independent political voices? How are these new nexuses or nexi to be formed? And do you see that formation taking place yet, Jimmy?
Well, I do. I think Bobby Kennedy, as his almost entire campaign is being run in alternative independent media. He's going around the mainstream news media, and he's going directly to the people. He's going through podcasts. And so, of course, they have to demonize those podcasts. I just saw the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, said he's worried because his son is listening to Joe Rogan. And I'm like, yeah, well, guess what? Joe Rogan.
I didn't see that, but that's funny.
That's the first time I heard that. That's funny as hell.
Lie to his kid about
bro, CJ, I told you, that's the number one struggle of liberals right now. Joe Rogan, man. These liberal white moms, oh my God, my son is listening to Joe Rogan. Sorry, that's so funny. That's so funny, but let's continue.
Truckers about
that's
COVID,
hilarious.
mandates, vaccines, lockdowns. Guess who did? Gavin Newsom did, and the establishment. This idea that the corporate news and the government officials put forward that somehow we're at risk, imperiled by independent media spreading misinformation. Well, I'm here to tell you, we all know that the number one spreader of misinformation and lies is the government. The second is the corporate media. And
I think he's going to say something about COVID there, so I'm going to stop it there. We can stop with this conversation. I watched the whole thing, and I was just listening for some words, and I think he's getting close to that point. But we'll stop it there for the conversation that they had. They do talk about a bunch of other things, but for our conversation, Nick, all I wanted to do was zero in on their conversation about revolution. I felt like they talked about the bulk of that, or we listened to about 99% of that conversation on revolution that they had. But overall, my takeaway is that there's a lot of good things. So now hope when they watch us, people in their camp of hope when they watch us, they say, yeah, there's a lot of good things they have. Yes, I don't agree with this small thing and that small thing. Just like we're saying, we agree with a lot of things, but RFK is not the guy, but revolution is the thing. This is how we want to build an understanding, Nick, so that we can build a coalition that we're going to understand there's going to be a lot of shit we don't agree on. But if we can pick the things that vastly affect the vast number of people, the best way, the most substantial way, and we can team together, that's the fight that we want to fight moving forward.
The same people who want us to cancel Jimmy Dore, despite the fact that he called out the police state and called for a revolution, these same people are the people who invited AOC to speak at a climate event. That shit is a complete circle, fam. The same people with Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome are the people who are like, yeah, AOC's at the climate event. You guys see how we got actual logic and reason behind how we choose our allies? They are friends and they buddy up with neocons, imperialists, people who break strikes. But they want us to break solidarity with people who are against the revolution, against war, and against the police state over small wedge cultural issues. Do you guys see how they kind of don't have our best interests at heart? They kind of operate in a way that they give us advice like, oh, you don't build coalition with people you disagree with. Don't build coalition with people you disagree with. That is actually how you build a left-wing movement, wink. If you want to build a successful left-wing movement, don't work with your neighbors. You ain't got to work with liberals, wink. As meanwhile, Bernie Sanders and Biden is doing press conferences about how they work together despite Biden's a neoliberal and Bernie is a progressive. So the reality of these people, and we've seen through these people immediately, and which is why I was blacklisted from the Bernie left, is because you guys just want us to organize with liberals and only liberals. And we reach out to a conservative, right? Oh my God, you promoting red, brown alliance issues. If you reach out to someone who don't vote Democrat, oh, my God, you working with this guy who had this bad take. As they are in bed with war criminals and warmongers. That's why I had the coverage that I did on the climate march. They had Jamal Bowman, one of the most blatant sellouts in recent history, and they cheering they allow him to get a campaign speech at their event, but they don't want us to associate with people who want to end the wars, calling out the police. They want to end Cop City and call for revolution. I know who have our best interests at heart. I know who don't, right? I know who's serious about this. And I know who don't. And that's why they don't like us, because we're not one who be influenced.
We're not just following around. Yeah.
Right? That's how it was in the beginning when we had 1,000 subscribers, 5,000 subscribers, 10,000 subscribers. Our message was, we're gonna put our message on the table. If you like it, you stay. If you don't like it, you can write in your diary. You can make a diss track if you want to. Block, right? Make a few diss tracks if you're really salty about what we're saying. But we're gonna say what we want. And I think we will be vindicated, as we consistently been vindicated over the last year or so.